Imagine a call that sounds like your bank. It sounds urgent, credible, and personal. Minutes later, only to find out that your savings are gone. What follows is panic, shame, and the feeling that you were treated as a careless user, not as a human being. What does security mean when you experience cybercrime as a person, not as a user? Welcome to this teaser episode for Be Cyber Experience Sharing Day and track 4, Cyberhumanism, about putting people, especially fraud victims, back at the center of security. Today's topic is the citizen as the victim, putting victims back at the center of cybercrime response. My name is Tommy Gontie, and joining me today are Veerle Peeters, cybersecurity awareness expert, and Isabelle Marchand from Febelfin, the Federation of the Belgian financial sector, which recently, by the way, launched a nationwide phishing awareness campaign. Ladies, it's a true pleasure to have you with me here today. Isabelle, victims are often associated with financial loss. I believe that is only one part of the story. Which part does not reach the surface?
Yes, indeed, I fully agree. What I think it's very important and what we may not underestimate is the emotional impact of online fraud. Online fraud, it affects both young and old, but we note that old and young have difficulties about talking about it. We recently did a survey and it showed that actually 64% of the Belgians feel ashamed when they would be a victim of online fraud. And if you compare this, for example, to home burglary, it's only 20%. And this feeling of embarrassment also reflects in their behavior. Because when we ask those people, only 36% says that they would share their online fraud experience with their family or with friends. And if you compare this to this home burglary, that would be 60%. And it's actually this silence that might also make other people more vulnerable because they don't talk about it, so they don't make other people aware of this fraud attempts. And when we ask this, and we also asked this in the survey, we noticed that 84% of the people say that it would be better to be more open about your online fraud experience, also to just make other people much more aware of certain fraud attempts and to make sure that they are also protected for this kind of frauds.
There clearly is like an emotional roller coaster which is starting off, and as I understood, not everybody is happy to talk about that. From a psychological point of view, Veerle, what happens typically with people when they have to live this type of situation?
Yeah, I think it's very recognizable what Isabelle mentioned. And for me, it's also, we just need to talk about it. But I'm a sociologist, always looking at why do people do what they do. There are certain mechanisms out there, and then I'm talking about mechanisms in our brain. From a behavioral science perspective, what is mapped out is that when people experience a fraud or a scam or some kind of crime, the first thing initially what you process is not the loss, but the first thing that people process is a threat to their identity. And it's really the fear of how do other people perceive me now. Yeah. And I think, and that's in the numbers as well, with the burglary, probably they're less scared of, okay, now people will say that I was careless. And I think that's really something that people process. And also from victimology research, there's like things called victim blaming attribution. It's indeed, we focus a lot on awareness campaign, on prevention. We put a lot of the responsibility also on people. We say a lot like, be vigilant. How can you be vigilant? So, but it quietly also gives the message, and it implies to people, so if something happens, it means that you were not vigilant. And people try to make it more personal, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that personal. Because this is something I talk a lot about now with all the phishing that is coming our way with the social engineering. It's not about people being stupid. It's really hackers, they still go in via the technology, but they are currently hacking our brains as well. And as human beings, we're very irrational in our decision making. We're influenced by how do we feel this morning, how stressed are we, the context of the information that you get within an organization, for example. But there's also certain, from a behavioral science perspective, there's a number, 6, 7 triggers where we as humans, you, me, everyone, we react in a very predictable way. And this is something that hackers know very, very well. And it's using authority, for example, is one of those triggers. If you use authority, almost in every phishing mail there is authority. If you combine it with urgency, hackers love deadlines. Everything needs to be quick. The promotion needs to be acknowledged now. Your bank calls and your accounts are blocked, so you need to act now in order to get the support. So it's not a flaw in a person, it's really neurobiology, it's how our brain works, and it's really hackers pushing those 2 buttons. So for me, it's not about a personality trait. We still hear a lot, you should have known, I should have known, because that's also how people internalize that. And that's indeed the blame, the self-blame. It's like, it's mechanisms that really,
It puts all of this being said, it puts extra weight and importance on the response that comes afterwards. How do people experience that nowadays? Is it perceived as transactional, as something artificial, perhaps? Do we have any view on that? Any perspective?
I think you're closer to the response line, but.
Yeah, no, I think it's very different from case to case. But what we see is indeed that people often feel very much blamed, ashamed, and that it's very difficult to talk about it. And then it's very important, I think, for these victims of online fraud to guide them actually through the process and to help these victims in the first place by blocking, of course, all their transactions and accounts to make sure that nothing can happen anymore. But afterwards, to help them also step by step through the entire process and keep them informed. What is your bank doing? Your bank is looking into this specific case. We'll come back to you. But it's also important to go to the police, to file a complaint. Which information do you need to go to the police that you don't have to go 4 times forth and back to your bank and the police, but to help them really through this entire process and to put actually the victim, to the customer, at the center of this approach.
Interesting, and a number of those topics we will still zoom deeper into. So I think that putting victims at the center it's not only about showing empathy as such, it makes the response more effective in practice. Undeniably, AI nowadays, it is affecting and even changing the game plan, right? All things AI-driven impersonation, manipulation. We're seeing the erosion of voice trust, the rise of scams that exploit emotion and urgency. Isabelle, what is changing for those victims when impersonation becomes, in fact, accessible and cheap and fast and easily available for everyone?
Yeah, I think it's fully true. I think online fraud fundamentally changed in nature. Today, it's very much an ecosystem-wide phenomenon involving multiple actors across the entire fraud chain. And we see that those criminals act much more professional. They use artificial intelligence. They often also act cross-border. They use deepfake voices. And there we see actually the shift from the mass phishing emails we all knew before to much more personalized attacks. And those fraudsters really manipulating the victims and trying to convince them to make transactions themselves, to authorize certain payments, to increase their limits. And they all go with this story of the fraudster. They are fully manipulated. And this makes it sometimes also very difficult for a bank to notice that it's really a fraud attempt, because in the first place it's seen as an authorized payment. So it's much more difficult for a bank to see the difference. And this is also very important to actually understand. It's, of course, banks have to do all measures to prevent and to detect online fraud, but there are also limits to these preventive and detection measures, and that we will have to work together with the entire ecosystem actually to stop this fraud and also try to block fraud there where it happens at the source. So work much more together with, for example, social media platforms and telecom operators where this fraud actually occurs.
Yeah.
If I wanted to add, indeed, that's more from the process perspective. But again, if you look at how we are wired as a human, people who hear me will recognize this. But if I ask the question to people, what are you most afraid of? A car crash or a plane crash? People still are a bit nervous getting into a plane. However, statistically, the car crash will happen more often. If I ask the question, what are you most afraid of? A shark attack or a heart attack? We're still more afraid of the shark. But again, root cause for that is more the heart attack. And there you see for what AI brings. If I asked a few years ago, what are you most afraid of? A heart attack or a cyber attack? People were more inclined to say the heart attack. And that really shows that our brain is, again, it's not an objective risk calculator. We are influenced by something. We can only fear what we can see, what we can envision. And for a very long time, a cyber attack, it's very technical, it's zeros and ones. A cyber attack didn't have a voice, didn't have a face, it didn't make a sound when it came in, or maybe a ping if something happened. But there you really see the shift with AI coming, because AI is giving that cyber attack a face. It is that deep fake, as Isabelle said. It is the voice cloning. It is your bank director calling. It is your granddaughter calling. It's really, they're using different fragments. And for me, that's really the shift with AI. It's not really a new modus operandi, because the mechanisms were there already. But it's the scale, it's the speed, it's like the personalization. It's really like a new playing field, and it goes much more from the systems into the people. And for me, that's really something that is very scary with AI, that comes with us. And also with speed, it really pushes us from what does being quick do with us as people. We go from reflection into reflex. We go from thinking into doing. It's like slow thinking, fast thinking. Yeah. And everything today needs to go quick, and everything needs to be super efficient. And that's actually, from a fraud perspective and from a cyber attack perspective, that is what also makes us vulnerable.
True. Now, we always say in terms of fraud, stay vigilant, be careful. Does that also resonate in the world of AI strategies for fraud? Or do we have to look at it from a different angle?
For me, saying those things, it's not incorrect, but it also implies that people have the time to be vigilant. Yes. That's what I mean with the speed. We still work sometimes in environments, with processes, with awareness programs as well, we kind of assume that people are perfect and that people have the time. If you say stay vigilant, it assumes that people have the time to scan all those, and we used to have the typos and the logos with like bad pixels, and that's also with AI. AI removed all those things.
Yeah, true.
And saying those things, it really implies a bit that we as people need to outperform our own brain and nervous system in like kind of manufactured urgency on a daily basis, every hour of the day, and you cannot have a bad day. So it puts a lot of pressure on people to say those things now, and I think we need to also start supporting people and putting them in a situation where they are surrounded by processes that really help doing that scanning, because as a human now with AI, it's almost impossible to do it.
Almost impossible. It's a very interesting debate. It's a huge change management track for a lot of people,
yes,
for society as a whole even. Moving onwards, in Belgium, we had Consumer Protection Minister Rob Beenders, who has asked banks for a concrete anti-phishing action plan that you are already aware of. And Febelfin also stressed that scams often start right outside banking, so beyond your control. Think of calls, messages and ads, making telcos and platforms part of the response. On the public side, we have Belgium's anti-phishing shield, which is also blocking malicious domains on DNS level, preventing almost 200 million clicks in 2025 only. That is crazy. And strengthening cooperation with the federal police. Isabelle, given that chain, like banks, telecoms, platforms, government, what would be the simplest victim-first improvement for what would matter today or tomorrow? Do you see opportunities there?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a multi-layered approach. With Febelfin, we have developed an action plan against online fraud, building on the many efforts banks are today already making in this fight against online fraud. And the action plan actually builds on 3 levels. The first level is the level of the individual bank and the additional measures that banks will take to prevent online frauds. And of course, that's an engagement across the sector to actually commitment to implement all these measures across the sector. And these measures are actually operational technical measures to prevent and detect online fraud. And I think it's also kind of an answer on what Veerle just said about the fast thinking that fraudsters actually imply. There are some measures actually that we foresee to try to block or to disrupt this fraud chain, this fraud attempt. For example, with a measure like the cooling off period, that when a client increases its limits on its bank account, that it will take for a minimum 4 hours before this takes effect. Okay. And at this moment, you actually delay the fraud chain and you create some more time to reflect, to think. Same, for example, with the measures where we'll ask to send notifications to the clients when their limit is being increased, so they can get notified, think from, oh, maybe something is wrong, I didn't do this myself. So you disrupt actually this entire fraud chain, create some more time for the clients, and also some moment for reflection. So you're actually delaying a little bit all this fraud attempts. And it's also sometimes called slow banking measures to slow down a little bit the all urgent needs actually.
I think that's very important now.
How does that resonate at your side, the feedback?
Yeah, I love to hear this. I think it's because I always say it's like a very difficult philosophical discussion, I think, because like I said, everyone is like optimizing for efficiency, optimizing for cost reductions. But when do we really optimize for security? And it's really not just putting some additional band-aids. It's really looking at how can we truly embed that secure behavior, those secure processes. And for me, it is about slowing down. I think in order to be more secure, to be more safe, we need to see that we move back a bit to that slow thinking, that we can be more critical. But in our day and age, I think that can be very challenging. But I really love hearing what Isabelle is saying.
Often a very difficult balance between customer convenience and slowing down some measures where you create also a sort of a friction for some customers. So it's always a very difficult and delicate balance to find.
It actually feels like reinventing a new balance and taking into account all the dimensions that play along.
But it's also
Go ahead.
It's indeed finding that balance, and it's what we see from a security perspective also within organizations. It's really making being secure a business driver. It should be an enabler to do business, and we still have to do a lot of work that people indeed understand that one of the functional requirements is not that the app does what it does, but the app does what it does and it is secure. And it's not like an additional optional layer anymore. It just needs to be integrated.
True. Thank you for adding on that. Well, of course, the question is not who is to blame, but how do we design a response that reduces harm and restores trust ultimately. Now, if we reframe cybercrime response as human care, what would change in systems, processes, and communication? I would like to talk about that with you. So let's close off with the victim-centric response, what that would mean in practice. Isabelle, for instance, is there a scenario or something that you think this must absolutely happen within the first 30 minutes after detection?
Yeah, in the first place, as I said before, we have to place, this victim really in the center of this approach. And in the context of the action plan, we developed recently, we also launched, for example, Fraud Stop. And Fraud Stop, it's a unique number, like Card Stop, that as a customer, when you become a victim of online fraud, you can call 24/7 immediately to actually contact your bank and to block your mobile apps, your accounts, so that no transactions can be done anymore. And now it makes it much more easier actually for customers to find a way to their bank. They don't have to search anymore the number that they have to call, because banks were already available 24/7. But if you're in a panic, you often don't know which number that you have to call. And with this Fraud Stop number, it's very clear to everyone. There is one number, one central gate actually, and you can be sure that your transactions will be blocked. So I think that's the first thing that has to be done within this 30 minutes when you become a victim of online fraud. And then you need, of course, to be helped by the fraud desk of your bank to do everything that is necessary. And there it's very important to guide really the client, the customer to do the right things, to also file a complaint with the police, to sort out the right information to file this complaint. And in the context of the action plan, we also made the commitment as banks to develop a certain communication charter. And in this charter, we want to make the commitment to really guide the clients from the beginning to the end, and to bring them a really individual approach and to guide them actually through that process.
Is there such a thing as it's maybe utopical, but an ideal workflow for banks or organizations to handle their customers? I'm guessing that it's different from one bank to the other. Do you come up with ideas, workflows that would say, if this happens, then we do this and or that, based upon experiences from fraud cases in the past?
Well, the workflows I'm going to leave up to the people experienced in the banking, but just adding to what Isabelle is saying, for me, very specifically, one thing that I find very important is if a person calls now to Fraud Stop, for example, if we look at trauma-informed research, it's very clear acknowledgement is super important. So in that call script for the person picking up the phone, helping, procedures do have its place, but I think it's super important in the first 30 seconds, 90 seconds of the phone conversation that people are acknowledged, that you say, it's okay, thank you for calling. You're not the only one. It's what we started with. It's like people, we need to just talk about this. It's not because you're a stupid person that you clicked on the link. It just happens to everyone. And I think that from a psychology perspective, that acknowledgement is like super important. And then come the procedures, and then come the instructions on what to do next, and guiding the persons. But from, that acknowledgement is super important. And that's like very often a step that we tend to quickly pass by because we all go in action mode and we're in helping mode, but standing still and saying, you're okay, this is not your fault, this is what the victim really needs to hear. And this is also what the brain interprets on like that threat, that identity, like I'm not a bad person because I shared my password or I clicked on that link, that pop-up that appeared.
Yeah, empathy as the beating heart. And I was just thinking that at that point when you end up in such a case, there's also a customer journey or experience that starts. And whenever there's a customer experience or journey, we can think of workflows, steps that need to be designed. Do we have some insights on that, as to what it ideally would look like?
No, and then I fully agree actually with Veerle that this acknowledgement is absolutely very important, and it might come with some limited changes actually to the scripts of the people who are doing the fraud desk, so that they change some wordings, and this might already be a huge difference for the victim. And then for the processes, we, for example, think about in the first place, we will create a kind of data platform to share actually intelligence between banks. And the idea is also in the future to enlarge possibly the data platform also, for example, to the police. And there I think for the victim, it can be useful if you create a kind of one case handling, for example, that as a victim, you maybe only have to tell your story, share your experience only once, that you don't have to do this several times on the same day to your bank, to the police, to the prosecutor's office, maybe to concentrate this more and to put actually in hold all this processing, the customer, the victim, much more to the center of this approach.
Okay.
I really agree. That's very important from a trauma perspective. Yeah.
A final question, because unfortunately we will have these type of scenarios more and more in the future. How are we going to scale this? Can we think of scalability into the future? How are we going to, how shall I say, how will we make victim support scalable in short term, mid-term, and beyond? Do we have ideas on what is going to happen in this disruptive world in terms of number? And how can this be managed on a more quantitative way, let's say? Who wants to?
Yeah, I think it's a challenging assignment. But I think we've said already many things and very good initiatives. For me, scalability is indeed putting it in the scripts, helping people to make it. It should not depend on one help desk person or a reception person who has like a good day and feels like able to be empathetic, empathic during that day. It's really providing that script on, okay, this is like the first 3 sentences are super important. Train people on those kind of things. For me, it's not asking the question anymore, like, why did that person click on the link? But it's more like, why, as an organization, have we created a situation where the decision of one person put us in a very difficult situation, and it's building those processes around it, those support systems around it, and try to scale that up. But I think it's very challenging to...
Your ideas on scalability?
Absolutely. Challenges are out there, and I hope that also with the enormous amount also of measures that with the entire ecosystem is also going to take against online fraud, that we might also maybe try to limit the number of victims in the first place, and that we do all our maximum efforts, banks, telecom operators, social media platforms, police, prosecutors' offices, to try to come with an answer to these fraud attempts. Okay, of course, they will always exist, but in the first place, we will have to really try to block them at the source, and hope that this will limit the number of fraud attempts fraud attempts today. So, and then, of course, full acknowledge that in all the processes we develop, that we have to put the victim at the center of all this.
I think one keyword is collaboration. I think we need to, it's like it takes a village to raise a child. From that perspective, if we all are children, that needs protecting these days. It's really, like you say, police, justice, bank, telecom. We just need to work together in order to solve this. We cannot do this anymore on our own islands. And
one coordinated approach.
I think that's key.
Challenges, opportunities, and collaboration. It was really a pleasure talking to you. I'm very grateful for our little chit-chat. Clearly, we can't talk about incident response and leave the victim out of the story. That would be like talking about emergency care without mentioning the patient at all. And that's really what cyber-humanism is all about, building security around people and not just around systems, networks, or infrastructure for that matter. At B-Cyber Track 4, we will take a closer look at that idea and ask a very simple but important question. What does safety actually mean when you're the person experiencing cybercrime, not the so-called user on the other side of the screen? Our key takeaway of the day: if security forgets the victim, it's not really security, it's just damage control. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the full debate at B-Cyber on September 22nd at La Sucrerie in Wavre in Track 4 on cyber humanism. Thank you for listening.